Okay, hello everyone. Today I'll be talking to you about ways to finance your graduate or postgraduate studies. So the agenda for today is I'll start by talking about the general application process and what that looks like and some of the general application components. Then I'll talk about cost of attendance or COA because that has a direct impact on how much aid you'll need to be seeking as an international student. Then I'll talk about different types of financial aid and different types of financial resources available and what merit and needs-based aid is. After that, I'll go over the different types of employment opportunities, what kinds of merit-based aids there are, like assistantships on campus and off-campus employment, fellowships, and scholarships. And then I'll mention some considerations and recommendations that you should take into account when you're looking for and applying for aid. And then I'll take questions at the end, like usual. So generally speaking, you should always check the university's policy for their financial aid, fellowships, and assistantships processes before you apply for fellowships or assistantships because universities don't always have the same processes. For some universities, you might be automatically considered for financial aid when you apply to the university and opt into receiving financial aid. For other universities, you might need to have a faculty member or a departmental nomination first before you're eligible to receive a fellowship. And then for some universities, you might need to apply for positions through the university's job portal or directly to the department of your field of study, who then review your application and then afterwards may or may not invite you for an interview if they're considering moving you through the process, and then you'll receive or won't receive the assistantship or fellowship position. Some of the most common components of assistantship and fellowship applications include your curriculum vitae or CV or resume, your statement of purpose, recommendation letter or recommendation letters, research proposal if you are submitting an application for a research um, fellowship. Transcripts, test scores are usually common components of applications, and there might be additional components that might be required for certain assistantship or fellowship positions, like a writing sample, for example. So before I go into more depth about those different types of financial aid and resources available to you as an international student, like assistantships and fellowships, first, I want to go over cost of attendance first. So cost of attendance or COA are all of your expenses needed for attending a university. So this includes fees directly associated with being enrolled at the university, like tuition and books and supplies, but it also includes indirect costs like rent and food or application fees associated with submitting an application to be accepted and enrolled into that university, and then additional fees, like fees paid for standardized tests, cost of sending, translating, certifying, and sending transcripts, and then the cost of your visa to study in the US legally. Your COA will also depend on multiple factors, like your personal spending habits, the location of where you're living, or the location of your university if you're living near the university, your housing situation too. So, for example, it's usually more expensive to live alone than with roommates, and so a lot of graduate and postgraduate students usually live with multiple people. So international students are primarily supported through personal family finances. However, there are additional ways to finance your studies, including employment opportunities and institutional aid and scholarships or external financing. I didn't include it on the slide, but loans may also be an option for international students to fund their studies, depending on the university. And the reason why I didn't include loans is because you have to pay them back, and because a lot of them usually require a US cosigner in order to receive the loan money, which is not something that a lot of international students have available to them. And so, in general, US universities have two different types of financial aid. There is merit-based aid, and then there's need-based aid. Merit-based aid awards financial aid to students based on their personal achievements. So that means looking at things like grades, test scores, extracurriculars, your work experience or research experience or teaching experience. And then there's need-based aid, which awards financial aid to students based on things like their personal situation or expected family contribution or family income. And these are things that are not related to your personal achievements and really strictly based on finances and whether or not you, based on your financial situation, genuinely need the aid. Most of the institutional aid that you'll find available to you, and most of the aid that I'll talk about today will be merit-based rather than need-based. And this is especially the case for fellowships. So a major source of financial aid for graduate and postgraduate students are assistantships. Assistantships are paid positions that students accept in exchange for work or research or some kind of labor. The main types of assistantships are teaching assistantships or TAs, where you may teach, grade, or support classroom instruction for undergraduate or even graduate students. There are also research assistantship positions or RA positions, where you may work supporting or completing research with a faculty member or with a team, which is usually the case with STEM students. Graduate assistantship positions support administrative functions, and there's a wide range and wide variety of different positions that would fall under the GA position. So there's a lot of different things you could be doing. So for example, one GA student might be working with admissions office, and then another one might be working with the university's IT or information technology department. There are also pre-professional graduate assistantship positions where you work with offices directly related to your field of study and gain experience that is directly related to your desired career. And then depending on the university policy, you might be able to only take on one of these assistantship positions, or you can take on multiple assistantship positions. So as an example, I'm a current graduate student, and during my studies, I've worked multiple graduate assistantship positions and research assistantship positions at the same time. So in the US, international students are allowed to work on campus for up to 20 hours a week when classes are in session, and then full-time during breaks. Based on US visa policy, international students are not allowed to work off campus without authorization under very specific circumstances, including CPT or economic hardship. And CPT, which is curricular practical training, is authorized off-campus employment. And usually this form of employment is only available to students after they've been enrolled at the university for at least one whole academic year. And you'll need to have been accepted to a position before you can actually apply for CPT. You should always check in with your future international student advisor, as well as looking at the university website for their eligibility categories, the CPT process, and any potential fees that might be associated with the CPT process. A lot of universities have students enroll in a specific internship course for their CPT, and depending on the university, there may or may not be a fee associated with that. So fellowships are another major source of aid for international graduate and postgraduate students. Fellowships allow students to receive financial support without teaching research, or administrative responsibilities in most cases. Fellowships are usually offered through specific academic programs in colleges, and in most, if not all cases, are merit-based rather than need-based. A nice thing about fellowships is that some of them can come with additional benefits beyond the money that you receive through the fellowship. So, for example, some might come with health insurance or coverage for professional development opportunities. So, if you're presenting at a conference, for example, and you need funding for travel costs or for hotel costs, that could be covered through your fellowship. Scholarships are another potential source of financial aid available to international students. They're similar to fellowships in that you receive financial support without having to do any of the work. But unlike fellowships, which are often applied to research projects, scholarships are applied specifically and exclusively to educational expenses like tuition and books and supplies. Scholarships also don't come with additional benefits like health insurance or coverage for professional development opportunities. Scholarships can come from the university or from the government or from a specific organization or another external source. They can also be merit-based or need-based. They're usually merit-based though, and they can sometimes actually be more competitive than fellowships because they tend to have a larger number of applicants than fellowships, which are usually dedicated to specific programs and then to specific students that have already been accepted into that very small specific program. And then a couple of examples of scholarships that students from Kazakhstan that can apply to are the Bolashok Scholarship and the Fulbright Scholarship, which is available for both those interested and involved in research and those interested and involved in teaching foreign languages, which would be anything that isn't English. So like Kazakh and Russian would be considered foreign languages. So some things you want to consider and think about as you're looking for and applying for merit-based aid are the application materials like your academic records and test scores and the overall availability of aid based on your field of study. There's usually more aid available for those going into STEM programs than for those in the humanities and social science programs. You definitely want to think about your statement of purpose and how you would tell your personal and individual story and show your commitment to your field of study to others. Generally speaking, the people that are looking at your statement of purpose want to see someone that knows exactly why they're applying to the program, that they have a very clear idea of what they want to gain through the program, very clear idea of what research they're interested in doing and stuff like that. So if you're interested in applying for merit-based aid, that's something you want to get started on thinking about. You also want to think about who you might be or who might be able to write a recommendation letter for you. Um, Especially because some universities might actually weigh your personal statement and statement of purpose and recommendation letters more than your actual grades and your test scores. You also want to reflect on any relevant experience that you have and potentially consider, if this is not the case already, updating your resume or curricular vitae with those relevant experiences if you haven't already. So things like research projects, any conferences you presented at, any papers, any recent work experience, even like volunteer experience is something you can put on your resume or CV. So some recommendations I have for uh, pursuing funding and applying for funding are looking for and applying to programs and universities with more funding available and communicating in writing with professors to see if there are any RA positions available and then reaching out to them after you receive your admissions offer. LinkedIn is generally a good place to connect with and keep up with faculty and see what their research projects are and what the progress on those research projects. You also want to check the department or university job application websites for GA and TA positions. And regardless of the university process, if you want to be considered for any assistantship position or fellowship, you should act fast and complete your application early since you're more likely to be considered for the fellowship or assistantship the earlier you submit your application with all of the required components. I also recommend applying to 6 to 10 universities and then comparing your financial aid package first before you agree to enroll in any university. And then this specifically is really a matter of your personal priorities. So if you care about the ranking or the reputation of the university, for example, that might be in conflict with the financial aid that they might be giving you. Some universities that are more highly ranked, they tend to be more expensive tuition wise. So if you're interested in specifically in reducing your cost of funding, but you're also interested in like a prestigious program, you might have to make the decision on which of those two is more important to you. In some cases, you might not have to make that decision, but that is something you should keep in mind when you're applying to universities and when you're receiving those acceptance letters and those financial aid packages. You should also consider taking location and tuition into account, like I mentioned earlier, because those are two factors that will have, in my opinion, the most major impacts on your cost of attendance, both in general, and it also impacts other parts of your cost of attendance, like housing and transportation. So, for example, housing and tuition is more likely to be a lot cheaper for international students that are attending universities in Tennessee versus universities in New York, for example. And that's just based on the location of the university or the state and the general trend of tuition wise. You should also check for other services and programs offered by the university that could help save you money while you're enrolled in the university. So, for example, some universities might have food pantries which offer free food. They might also have things for students that are also parents, like baby powder, diapers, stuff like that. Some universities offer free or discounted public transportation for students. So, for example, when I was in undergraduate school, my undergraduate university offered free public transportation for all enrolled students. So, undergraduate, graduate, postgraduate students could all ride any of the regional buses for free, which is very helpful because it was a commuter school, which is a school that has a lot of students that either take the bus or the train or car to travel from their home to the school. So the cost for transportation can get pretty expensive if you're commuting from one place to the other and don't have any free or discounted resources from the university. Of course, you should also see if there are any current students or faculty that would be willing to talk with you about funding, especially students that have received certain scholarships or fellowships that you want to apply for. So, for example, if you find on the website that there's a graduate student that's received the Fulbright Scholarship for research in your field of study, that might be someone you would want to reach out to and learn more about the application process for them and how that went for them and get some tips on that could help you when you're applying for the Fulbright Scholarship. Okay, so that is it for the session. Tomorrow's session will be the same time today, same time as usual, and we'll be going over resume and CV writing, which is one of the most common components for assistantship and fellowship positions. And it might be something, or most likely will be something that will be required in your actual university application anyway. We'll also be having another session this week on requesting a strong letter of recommendation, which I've talked about think in multiple sessions, something that you'll probably need for assistantships, something you'll probably need or definitely will need for fellowships, and will most likely need for your university application. And then next week, we'll be starting our session series on writing motivational letters and and understanding what a motivational letter is. So if you have any questions after this session, you can contact my supervisor, Donna Nakayeva, through WhatsApp at +1 701 266 96080, by email at educationusa.org. You can also contact me through WhatsApp at +7 705 985 7408, or by email at qtownsend@middlebury.edu. And like all sessions, you can also scan the QR code to access extra materials for this session, which include more information on what assistantships and fellowships are and the differences between those. There's scholarship databases and then resources on applying for fellowships. There's also a link at the top of the document that will include the slides for this session and also has the slides for the previous two sessions. The video for this session will be posted on YouTube and will also be posted in the same folder with the slides and the videos from the last two sessions. Okay, thank you for listening and attending. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome and more than free to post them in the chat starting now.